have all these devices, and in many ways we're disembodied, and that disembodiment creates a lot of angst. So I think the first milestone in a Zen spiritual path is discovering that you have a body. And that actually you could respect the body by listening to the body as a source of wisdom. It's not just something that carries your head around. It's actually a source of wisdom. And so and it's nonverbal. The body is not verbal. So we are very verbal too. So we have a hard time trusting the body. But so one thing that happens in sitting, and I think you'll notice this even in a short retreat like this, is as you kind of settle into your posture and the breathing, and it may be hard to settle because we're often in pain or we're sleepy and we're kind of struggling, but as you get through some of that and you settle, you notice this sense of being embodied, which feels grounded, it feels safe. And the body does not lie. The body is an open book. It's telling us what's going on in the environment all the time. So the breath is important because it helps us remember that we have a body, because we're often up in our heads, thinking. And I think the first thing to say about meditation is that when I teach it, we start by talking about meditation from the inside out, which will just contradict what I just said. Welcome to Zen. The posture is important, the mechanics are important, but maybe more important in the beginning is that you simply have some loving kindness towards yourself and acknowledge whatever your experience is as it is, without trying to feeling like it's not good enough, or you're not good enough, or you're not having the right kind of experience when you're meditating, you're thinking too much, you have emotions, whatever. So meditation from the inside out is you start with your own internal experience. You're not, if you're picturing meditation as someone sitting in full lotus on top of the Himalayas somewhere, a perfect yogi in perfect full lotus without moving, that's not helpful. Because none of us are yogis. Well, maybe some are, but most of us aren't. And then you're trying to superimpose an external image onto your meditation, and that's not gonna be helpful. So you start with yourself. You start with where you're at. You start with what your own experience is. And meditation, from this perspective, is just attuning to yourself. We don't even have to call it meditation. Are we brave enough to be alone with ourselves and just be with what's here? And maybe I don't like what's here, but meditation is being with what's here. And so the definition we use in all our classes of mindfulness, it's an intentional awareness. This is intentional. You had to want to come here. You didn't just come here haphazardly. You actually signed up for a retreat. You paid for it. You made time out of your busy life to be here. So you wanted to be here. We intend to be mindful. Mindfulness didn't happen accidentally. You have to kind of want to pay attention, to be present, to show up. And then it's an intentional awareness. It's embodied and without judgment. Yeah, that third part's may seem pretty idealistic. Yeah, so I think the first step when you're just being with yourself is noticing that you do have judgments about yourself and probably about other people. You might find some people in the Zendo really irritating. I sat a 7-day sesshin once with Aiken Roshi on the Big Island, and we were down at, what's that Tibetan place? Wood Valley. And I sat next to, I was in a lot of pain the whole sesshin. I was moving, I was sitting half lotus in those days. I was much younger. And I was, having a hard time. The guy sitting next to me was sitting full lotus, perfect, that didn't move. I was so irritated with him the whole time. I'm in a retreat. You're supposed to be peaceful. And afterwards, I met him and talked, because you don't talk during retreat, right, Ken? Yeah. So I didn't get to talk to him, but after the retreat, I talked to him. Turned out he's a really nice guy. So we have judgments. That's just, we're human beings. We have so it's not that you won't have judgments, but you could begin to have a kind of meta-awareness of the judgments you're having, instead of taking them as being so solid and so, they're not as solid as you think they are. And that's the first step. You're starting to be with your experience. And I think the key here is loving kindness, just being kind to yourself. Hey, you're here. You got here. This is an achievement. You showed up. There's not many people are brave enough to be with themselves, really, this way. Most people are busy running away from themselves. So we show up for ourselves, and then we put ourselves into this schedule, which is, our schedule is pretty loose compared to a traditional Zen center, but Jun, Roshio, and me are getting older, and we can't practice the way we used to. And you're probably thankful for that, because the schedule, we have a long rest period in the afternoon, and but we get in quite a bit of meditation, nevertheless, each day. So what are you doing on the cushion then? You've taken care of your posture. You're not looking for some result. You're not chasing after some special experience that you think you're supposed to have when you're sitting, like you think you're supposed to be peaceful, or you think you're supposed to be, I don't know, not thinking, but you are thinking, and maybe you're not peaceful. Maybe you're upset with somebody or yourself, or you're struggling with something, or you're sad. So you show up with some kindness and some kind of tolerance for yourself and the wide range of experiences you might have that you discover sitting on a cushion. So now we get this far, and meditation from the inside out it really isn't strong enough medicine. Now you notice that you've got a pretty busy mind. We're all human beings. We are creatures of habit, and our minds are pretty busy. And just loving kindness towards yourself probably isn't going to cut through that. You actually need you need stronger medicine. And so then I never call it a technique, because as soon as you call it a meditation technique, then you think there's a way to do it right, or there's a way to do it wrong, and that's not helpful. So, well, even before we introduce this meditation method, the second step in our classes is usually a very minimal. The first meditation instruction I give people is, notice that you have an intention to be still, sit 10 minutes and watch what you do. It's purposefully minimal, very few rules. And most people think that's not meditation. It's not. If I sit 10 minutes with myself, I'm just going to be daydreaming the whole time, or be thinking about my next vacation, or the ice cream I'm going to have after I'm out. This is meditation, but yeah, this is where we begin with what you're doing. But again, that's not strong enough medicine. So then the traditional, really foundational practice is called shamatha in the Buddhist tradition, or one-pointed attention. And what you are doing is, it's very methodical. There's no ambiguity here. You're counting the out breath till you get to 10, and then you start over. That's it. Some traditions will say counting the in breath or count both the in breath and the out breath, but that's too busy. So the idea is your intention is on the out breath and then you relax on the in breath. It's kind of like being awake and sleeping. We can't be awake 24 hours, we have to rest. So it's the same with the breath. Your attention is on the out breath and then you relax on the in breath. Now the out breath is important because it's also connected to that part of our vagal nervous system which helps us come into homeostasis or balance. So when we are anxious, our breathing changes. If you're feeling fearful or you're in a place of fight, flight, your breathing changes and you're going to be emphasizing more the in-breath because what the body is doing is wanting to get more oxygen to prepare for fighting or running really fast. So the in-breath tends to take us out of that balance and homeostasis. The out-breath tends to help us relax, which is we want to do when we're sitting meditation. We don't want to be in fight, flight when we're sitting here, although that's possible. So the emphasis on the out-breath. You count as you're breathing out. You breathe in, you relax. You count again until you get to 10, and then you start over. Seems very simple to count to 10, right? I can do that, 1, 2, 3. But when you do it, you discover you don't always get to 10. Yeah, because we're busy, our minds are preoccupied, we're worried, we're thinking about other things, and so what happens is you forget the count. And then when you forget the count, at some point you notice you forgot the count, and you come back. So the counting is a device to kind of keep ourselves honest. Sort of like I know if I'm not paying attention to my breath because I lost the count, I'm off. I'm off and running. My mind's off and running. And so, because I'm being intentional, because I sat down here with an intention to show up and use this device to help me do that, when I notice that I've lost the count, I just come back. It's a light touch, and I'm back. And that's actually very powerful medicine. It seems like a very simple thing, but it's very powerful to do. You are training yourself to be mindful. And the purpose is not to get to 10. The purpose is to come back. How many times do we have to come back? Don't count that, because that's endless. That's a lifetime. I still do counting the breath. When I haven't sat for a while, I will start by counting the breath. It gets me. There's no way to fool myself when I'm counting the breath. I don't get to 10. I got to do it again. And then as you do this, hopefully you more often you get to 10 and you're not spaced out as often, and you notice that you're showing up here. And this is actually both boring and could be pleasant, just to be present. If you're bored, you're probably doing it right. It's not particularly exciting to count your breath. We're not talking about, bells and whistles or firecrackers going off. But what you notice as you do this, and this is a foundational practice that everyone goes back to, is you begin to be able to land on one dot, one spot at a time. There's a sense of precision happening in your mind. And that's really important, to be able to land on one dot. We are not multitasking here. We're doing one thing at a time. Well, the idea when we do Samu this morning, is you're doing one thing at a time. Sweeping, it's usually manual labor, right? You're cutting the vegetables, you're vacuuming, you're mopping, you're just doing one thing in front of you at a time, and that's actually a very pleasing way to work. But no one teaches us in this culture that it could be pleasant to work that way. We think that, oh, I just got to get it done. No, actually, when you do one thing at a time, it's very pleasing. And there was a study done on this, and we always talk about it in our classes. Killingsworth wrote an article, a distracted mind is an unhappy mind. And he wrote an app. He was somewhere back east, and he distributed this app to people. And then he polled them during the day. He would say, what are you doing right now? And on a scale from 1 to 10, how happy are you? And what he discovered was that when we are doing something single-mindedly, just doing that, it could be our least favorite thing. It might be washing the toilet or something. We're actually happier. And when you're doing your favorite thing and you're multitasking, you're not as happy. Well, that should tell us something about how important it is to show up. So, one-point attention is a way we begin to cut through the speediness in our mind. And from this point of view, we could almost say the speediness is a kind of neurosis. And we need to cut through that so that if you're just speeding all the time, it's really hard to notice what's here in front of you. You're already 5 steps ahead of yourself. You're out in front of your skis all the time. So we have to slow down. And that requires some patience. It requires the courage to sit still on your cushion, to come to a retreat like this and do this work. It's not so easy to slow down and be present. And thankfully we have each other, everyone to support each other, and we have a very old wisdom tradition that we have inherited that allows us to practice with these forms. So then, so one point, shamatha is the beginning, basic, foundational mindfulness practice. And then as you mature in meditation, then there's a second, more dynamic kind of mindfulness that we begin to appreciate called vipassana, or open awareness practice. And that you either notice, this either happens organically, because you're sitting enough that it does, or you get some instruction from a teacher like I'm telling you right now. So if you're getting an instruction from a teacher, often the situation might be that you were first given the instruction from the teacher to count your breath, to do one-point attention, and you practiced that for maybe years until you got really good at it. And then eventually the teacher comes along and says, okay, why don't you let go of the count and just follow your out-breath into space and see what happens. And you say, oh, I just got good at counting. Now I'm getting to 10. Why? I'm going to lose all my discipline if I don't count. And the teacher says, well, go ahead, why don't you try it and see what happens? So you try it. And you notice, no, you don't lose your discipline. Now, something really interesting happens. You're following your breath, your out-breath still, but you're not counting it, and you're following it into space. And because you've built a strong foundation with one-pointed attention, what you begin to appreciate is the context. One-pointed attention is the dot, right? It's my fist. It's the object. Open awareness is everything that makes this object possible around. This is the foreground. Open awareness is the background. Open awareness is about context. It's much more about meditation in action. Meditation that we're practicing when we get off the cushion, in relationships, when we go to work, raising kids, going to, shopping. And this is a much more dynamic kind of meditation, and it's considered more advanced. So if you started out with open awareness practice, the chances are you would space out, that's not the intention. But if you've had this grounding in one point of attention, then when you begin to move into open awareness, you've internalized that precision through the beginning practice. And so you don't lose that precision. You actually find spaciousness has precision already in it, and you're not necessarily in charge of that, but you're actually appreciating that it's already here. And that's kind of interesting, that there's both spaciousness and precision at the same time. And now the practice is really relational. We are relational. We're not islands unto ourselves. We're social beings. A huge part of our well-being and our spiritual health has to do with the nature, the quality of our relationships with others. Our capacity to communicate, to connect, to be empathic, to listen, to not be too reactive, to not be too defensive, to be patient. All qualities that are talked about quite a lot in our tradition. So now we have these two mindfulness practices. And there's a third in the Zen tradition that if we were strictly a Zen center, we just might start with the third one, but I consider that third one advanced. So I think it's important to start slowly and work up to this third kind of meditation is what we call shikantaza. And in Zen, that means just sitting. Now there's no reference point. There's no duality anymore. You're still breathing, but there's no, and you are sitting well. You've already established that you can sit in a posture that you can kind of let go into. You're already have kind of had this milestone of noticing about being embodied. And now you sit and everything sits. Everything sits in shikantaza. There's no me and you anymore. When I sit shikantaza, everything here is sitting with me. There's no me sitting here anymore. Everything sits. No duality. That's advanced kind of meditation. When I sit shikantaza, I'm not seeing objects in space. I am not an object in space. I am part of everything that's here. So Zen is pointing spiritually to a kind of realization that we are, when we chanted that sutra this morning, the Heart Sutra, talking about emptiness, this teaching is often misunderstood, and people think that sounds very negative or nihilistic, I guess. But actually, what we mean by that teaching is that reality is completely interwoven and interconnected, and we are part of this reality, and we are not islands unto ourselves. So the huge teaching in our tradition that we work with all the time is the nature of the self that we've constructed, right? Called ego. It's not all bad. Every teacher I've ever known had a really big ego. So nothing the matter with the ego. It's part of how we grow up. We need a strong self to cut the umbilical cord with our parents and find our way in the world. You need a strong ego to go out and find your way, to create a career, make a living, create a family, find where you're going to live. All that is, really requires a strong sense of a healthy psychological sense of self. So there it is. We're a very individuated culture. And the way, for me, what's important in Zen is not only the spiritual realization, but also the psychological maturity that needs to go with that. We have an ego that serves us very well, but then as you get older, you notice that this ego is not it's not helpful in many situations. It's actually quite limited, and it has served you well, and now all of a sudden it's getting in the way. You are getting in the way of yourself. And the real inflection point on the spiritual path here, in terms of Zen, is when you begin to see that. You started sitting and you notice that the self you thought you were is not so solid as you thought. You're not as solid as you thought you were. That's kind of like a discovery. Oh, I'm not really a noun, I'm more like a verb. I have a name, I have a birthday, I can tell you where I was born, I have all that story, but am I gonna settle for that? Is that who I am? Is that who you are? Aren't we more than that? But then, who are we? That's a spiritual question. And as you begin to get curious about this, I think it's really an inquiry. And now practice becomes an inquiry into who the heck am I then? If I'm not Bob, who am I? If I'm not my role, if I'm not the Roshi, then who am I? If I'm not a Buddhist, who am I? If I'm not a Zen Buddhist, we have all kinds of identities that we attach to. So you get curious, you start to get curious about this, and then you read about the Dharma, or you hear a talk of somebody like me pontificating about this, and you say, gee, there's something, who the heck am I? And I'm not so solid. That might be scary, or it might be liberating. And so then I think you begin to appreciate with practice that the way you construct the self is actually a source of a lot of suffering. We are sticky. We stick to ourselves. We stick to opinions, ideologies, points of view, judgments, it's on and on and on. And so this inflection point is you're beginning to let go. And you're beginning to trust that the universe is sacred and it could carry you along, and you're not in control. You're in control of some things. I'm in control of drinking this cup of water right now. There's so much that we're not in control of. And when we are trying to control everything, then life becomes a struggle. And that's a source of a huge amount of suffering. Oh, those little kids, so cute. You see them all the time. They look like ducklings, you know. Sometimes they hold a string to be safe. Yeah. So this inflection point is really important. You begin to notice that it required a lot of willpower to get here. You have to arrange your life to do this practice. And you're choosing to do this. You could be somewhere else today. You could, there's so many things but you chose to be here. And so it requires willpower to do this practice. We have to want to do it. We have to organize our life so we can do it. We have to carve out time to do it and not make excuses to avoid doing it because it's not so easy. And you get into it. You show up on the cushion and you start doing this practice, but at some point you notice that willpower is getting in the way. You're getting in your own way, and you have to actually let go of that. And that's really the beginning of the spiritual path, I think, is the letting go. It's not, I still have, it's subtle. I'm not suggesting we don't have agency. We do have agency. That's the ego. We have agency. It's really important psychologically to have agency. But you also let go in a way that there's a larger sense of who you are here, and it's not based on your identity so much. And that's the beginning, I think, of the Zen spiritual path. And the shikantas I'm talking about is really that kind of letting go. Everything sits. There's no, at both one point attention and open awareness, there's still a reference point, which is the breath. And in shikantas, there's no longer any reference point. So here's the other interesting thing. When we chant the Heart Sutra this morning, there's two things that come up in the Heart Sutra always. This notion of emptiness, or shunyata, and what's called prajna, or prajna wisdom. They always arise together. And prajna is wisdom. It's not wisdom about something, because that's dualistic. It's wisdom that's not dualistic. So, the way we create a self is by having reference points of this and that. Me and you, me and the world. Reference points, always dualistic, right and wrong, good and bad, up and down, left, right, conservative, liberal, good, bad, winning, losing. And we actually create a self by those dualistic reference points. We do this with our minds. Our minds are very powerful, and we don't even think about it. We've learned to do this growing up. It's part of our conditioning. So when you have reference points, dualistic reference points, then that creates some sense of me here, some sense of self-consciousness, and that's based on fear. There's me here, and me, I have to create, I have to protect this. This has to be, I have to defend this territory. And I have to continually work to solidify this me, because it's actually a house built out of sand. It's not solid at all. So it takes a lot of work for me to keep convincing you that I'm real, that I got it all together. So it's kind of like, you know, when you watch a sporting event and they do the replay of the touchdown, well, we're doing that all the time. We're replaying what we said. Did I say it right? Or I could have said this, or we're rehearsing what you're gonna say. If you're having an argument with someone, you might not even be listening to what they're saying, because you're all rehearsing what you're gonna say to win the argument. We're doing this all the time. That's ego. That's ego's game, and that is a source of a great deal of suffering and fear, because the fear is I'm gonna lose my territory. So that dualistic reference point. So we could say that at some point in practice, when you begin to notice that it's possible to let go of it and not hang on so tightly, you notice that there is another kind of intelligence here that you have access to, which is non-referential. It's not dualistic. This is what we call prajna wisdom. non-referential. It's not based on those reference points. It's very direct. It's a no bullshit meter. If I begin to trust prajna, then I'm gonna get feedback when I'm doing something fishy. And so this prajna always comes together with this teaching of emptiness. They arise together. And one of the really actually good things about traditional Zen practice, we don't do practice this way, but like if you were in a Zen monastery in Japan, you would be working all day. You would be sitting and working, and you'd sometimes be running to work. I mean, it usually is a practice for young people, teenagers. They go to the monastery, and then they go back and take over their parents' temple. But that practice keeps you busy all day long. And you say, that's terrible, who wants to do that? But if you actually put yourself in that kind of setting, you don't have any time to be worrying about yourself. You don't have any time to be rehearsing what you're going to do next. It's everything is always in front of, it's right in your face. And you don't, if you're preoccupied about yourself, you're going to miss ringing the bell at the right time when you're supposed to ring it. And so when we do the service this morning, it's a kind of choreography, right? We're all doing it together. And you have to pay attention because you've got a role and you have to do the thing at the right time. And if you don't, then, it doesn't work. So that kind of training, our training isn't that severe, but in a sense it is, right? We're actually the bell rings, you get up, we walk together, we eat together, we do service. So service is probably the most interesting in terms of the choreography. But I will talk more about the services tomorrow, because I think it's also important to have a context about why we do this and what those services are about. So we've come to this point where we start to notice that we're getting in our way, and how do you get out of there's no method for how you let go. There's not a how-to book about how to let go. You just do it. You figure out how to do it because you've not done it so many times and it hasn't worked that you start figuring it out. You just we all figured this out on our, we're kind of, Zen kind of throws you into the deep end of the pool and says swim. And if you don't swim, you drown. It's kind of a rough method. But life is a teacher, right? Life will give you feedback. If you're always trying to be in control, life's going to give you a lot of feedback. It's going to be disappointing. So then this brings us to maybe the most important thing about our practice is that once we've established our capacity to show up and to have some clarity about what we're doing, and we begin to appreciate how we project all the time, and we are projecting our own vision, our own view onto other people. We're not really seeing other people clearly. And as we open, we're really opening our hearts. This isn't just an intellectual thing. We're opening. And then you notice that we have this sad and tender heart. We've all suffered. We've all experienced unfairness or injustice. The world is not just. It's a jungle. I mean, and we have all suffered. And and this happens organically. There's no method for you. You just notice that you have a sad and tender heart. And that's actually your soft spot. And we've been defending against that our whole lives, trying to wall it off. I got it together. I'm not tough. Yeah, let's be tough. good to be tough, tough love, but also good to have a sad and tender heart. We call this bodhicitta. It's a place of great strength in you. And you can do almost anything with bodhicitta. And once you begin to trust this in yourself, now you've discovered something really important, that the spiritual path isn't so much about what you're going to get, but it's what you're going to give. And then you discover that instead of living by your impulses or your emotions, you can live by a vow. And the vow that we live by in our practice, we call it the Bodhisattva vow. And we'll chant it tonight. Did we chant it in the service? Yeah, I think. No, we don't actually. I don't think we do. At the end, yeah. So that Bodhisattva vow is a vow to save all sentient beings. It's a vow, it's a universal vow to be of service, to help, to heal suffering wherever it resides in the human heart, or in any heart. And that's a very powerful thing. And also it's impossible. Nevertheless, we take this vow. And it is the heart of the Zen spiritual path. And once you get this, it's like the Buddha discovered something extraordinary. First of all, he discovered that we suffer. He named it, First Noble Truth of suffering. It's noble to name it. But he also discovered, and we suffer because we have the self, these selves that we create. But he also discovered that this radical spiritual path, that if you give yourself away, if you give yourself to others in the service of healing others, you will forget about your own suffering. In fact, your own suffering doesn't really matter when you really wholeheartedly take this vow to relieve other people's suffering, then your suffering is not so big. And there's a joy in living from this place. It's a big place to live from. It's a brave place to live from, and it makes all the difference in everything. So that's really the heart of our Zen path, is what we call the Bodhisattva vow. And it's not just a belief, it actually comes experientially through bodhicitta, your sad and tender heart. It's like where you're having open heart surgery. It's tender. So maybe we could have, that's a lot. Maybe we could have some discussion. Questions, comments, time to, yeah. We didn't record it. Oh, you did? Oh, too bad. Any questions, comments? See, when we do the service, then, we're actually giving away our merit. When we dedicate the merit of each service, when we do the first service of the Heart Sutra, we dedicate that merit to all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas throughout all space and time, all wherever they may be. In Mahayana Buddhism, they often have this kind of cosmic sense. There's many Buddhas everywhere. And we dedicate the merit to them. We dedicate the merit to enlightenment. So anything that any merit we are actually developing good merit by this practice that we do. But from the Bodhisattva perspective, any merit that we gain, we give it away, because the generosity is the point. The gift is the giving. And the gift is not in getting a reward back. The gift is in actually opening your heart and being free. And so all the services we did this morning, we were dedicating the merit to different people. We had a service where we dedicate the merit to people that are sick. We have a long list of people we love that are not doing well. And then we have a death and transition list of people that have died within the last year, and we always name them to remember them and to honor their lives. And we give them merit, and we just give the merit away. And that's a beautiful thing to do. It's liberating. And if you really wholeheartedly do that kind of practice, then whatever you're preoccupied with, it's not so big anymore. It's not so overwhelming. It's workable. Doesn't mean we won't suffer, doesn't mean we won't have challenges and difficulties, but it's workable somehow. And this practice helps us. I hear this all the time. I've heard this ever since I've been teaching. When people start this practice, here at some point they'll say, yeah, things aren't quite so problematic as they used to be. The problems are workable. And we could go into the neuroscience about why that is, but it has a lot to do with the executive functioning in the brain. That mindfulness strengthens your executive functioning so you can actually approach things that you would normally avoid or procrastinate doing. Makes it easier to pay your taxes on time, or whatever it is, or pay your bill, or whatever. You are strengthening a part of your brain that is, it's called an approach state, that actually tends to be more optimistic, tends to be approach things that you would normally not approach, right? Do things, and you actually strengthening the executive functioning helps you carry through on tasks, helps you focus, and helps you, I think the real kicker is that it helps you approach things that you normally would avoid doing. And that's the notion that all of a sudden the world seems more workable. The things that seemed so problematic to me before actually aren't the problems I thought they were. So, okay, I keep talking. You say something so I stop talking. Ask a question. Anything?
I've been reflecting lately about grief and thinking about, in our minds, grief has duality. It's something you go through, but it's also something you go over or get over. And there's a lot of duality in how we conceive of grief. And so what I'm thinking about is, if we reimagine grief, that can be enough to reduce suffering.
Yes, grieving is a huge part of our humanity, isn't it? And we don't do it very well. And, we're not kind about this. When people lose someone they love, the family member says, and they're grieving 2 months later, and the family member will say, hey, you should get over that. No, you get over it when you get over it. It's like, no, grief is organic, and there's no one way that grief happens or how long it happens. When you lose someone you love, you're gonna grieve until you don't. And grieving is extremely important. And people, if you're scared to feel that that sadness, then you kind of dry up. There's a part of you that gets kind of bitter and closed. I think grief is extremely important in terms of opening our hearts. There's all kinds of things to grieve about too, not just people we lose, but the environment, the coral reefs that are dying, and the oil that's leaking in the Gulf of Mexico somewhere. That you see that. Remember that picture we saw of the oil flowing into the Gulf? You see that, and it's like, if you're if you're paying attention, you're going to feel grief about that. So it doesn't mean that we're necessarily wallowing in it. Yeah. So we call it bearing witness. So part of this practice of grieving is that if you open to it and really it percolates in you, you move through it too at some point, and you don't just get stuck in it. So sometimes people get stuck in their suffering and they hang on to that drama, and that's not quite the same thing, right? Yeah.
I think something that was very helpful to me from a grief counselor was that this is not something wrong with you. This is normal. It's even healthy. It means that you have loved.
Yeah.
And it's something that we do, like you were saying, we push a lot of these emotions or feelings away because they hurt so much.
Yeah, it's a terrible thing to tell someone they're grieving that there's something the matter with them.
Right.
That's just mean.
Or we feel like there's something the matter with us. Am I crazy or whatever?
Yeah, no. Yeah, it's a huge part of our humanity to be able to grieve. Thank you. Yeah. Anything else? Jackie? Jackie.
This isn't really anything you address, but this has been just how do you deal with physical pain when you're meditating and just when you're not meditating? Physical pain, how do you, I guess, because I know we're not supposed to push that away either, but that's all you want to do.
It's a really good question. Yeah. Let me put it in the context of meditation, and I don't sit cross-legged anymore because I've gotten older and I'm overweight and I can't do it. Had knee operations, but when you're sitting cross-legged, you will have leg pain. Your legs go to sleep. There's pain in the back or something, and part of the tradition is to kind of sit into that. So you find, and it's kind of counterintuitive, that if you kind of sit into the pain, and instead of pushing it away, you kind of open to it. You kind of welcome it. You say hello to it. It's a kind of welcoming. There's a kind of initial panic about the pain that you want it to go away. But then it's there, and you're stuck in this situation because you're in the retreat, and you don't want to stand up because you'll embarrass yourself because everyone else is sitting so still, and you're the only one that's so you do it, right? You go through it, and you're really happy when Ken rings the bell to end the period, and you're kind of looking at your clock out of the corner of your eye, but you doing that, you find that actually pain is partly subjective. Not completely. There can be physical sources of pain, but there can also be psychological sources of pain. And if you are tightening around the pain, you're actually creating more pain. And so pain is an interesting teacher, that if you approach it without trying to run away, and you have this sitting practice, which is a container for being with that, you find that actually it shifts over time, or it may shift over time. And the teaching about this always is if you have leg pain and you get up, the reason why we do walking meditation is so you stretch your legs, and we get up slowly so you don't fall over, right? Your legs are asleep or something, and then you do walking meditation, you go back and do it again. But if you have pain and it persists for days, then you might be doing physical injury or something, and you should look at that, and you don't want to hurt yourself. But, you know, I think, you know, in fact, mindfulness really began with Kabat-Zinn, working with patients in Massachusetts somewhere that had huge physical pain that the doctors couldn't deal with, and so they sent them to Kabat-Zinn, and he developed a mindfulness program, and he put them on a diet of, you know, 45 minutes of meditation a day. They were doing body scans, and they discovered that actually that practice helped people. It didn't make the pain go away, but it helped them be with the pain in a way that was workable. Yeah. So, yeah. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And every time I try to read about it, it's always about chronic pain, but it's never about acute pain.
What?
Acute pain, when you're like,
Uh-huh.
so not even necessarily from meditating, but just you get an injury or something, and it's like a sharp, like excruciating pain.
You know, if it's a kind of sharp shooting pain, you might want to change your posture. Again, you don't want to hurt yourself either. So usually the pain that we have in sitting is you got a sore back, or your legs are going to sleep, or something like that, and you can sit into that. If you have some sharp shooting pain going up here, like a nerve, then you maybe want to take a look at that and change your posture.
Yeah, for me, it's not about the posture, it's actual pain. Like I had a procedure and
I see.
it's like in pain, so I'm trying to meditate on the pain, but I'm not sure. It's
I
not,
understand.
yeah.
It's not easy. I broke my shoulder a couple months ago, and I have a hard time sleeping. It's there, and because it's painful, it's hard to let go into the sleep. But
Thank you.
again, I think it's a matter of approaching it with, just approaching it, not running away from it.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you about something you said in Mahayana, I can't say it,
Mahayana?
Mahayana Buddhism, there are many Buddhas.
Uh-huh.
And is that what this Zen practice is? Is it, I can't say the word with an M,
Mahayana.
Mahayana, I can say it, Mahayana.
Well, there are
is
many kinds of sutras. And Mahayana is a very big school of Buddhism. Zen is a school within Mahayana Buddhism. There are many different ways of practicing Buddhism, and there is one kind of sutra where it's cosmic. The Buddhas are cosmic, and who's to say they aren't? But and they will mention many Buddhas throughout space and time.
And is that a part of the tradition
Yeah.
that we're part of,
Yeah.
that the center is representing?
Who's to say there's not something there in the universe that's supporting us?
So is the idea that, I mean, I've heard the expression, the Buddha in everyone,
Well,
is
we
in,
are intrinsic, yes, the teaching of Zen is that we are intrinsically awake. So you can't attain that because you already are awake. But you can discover that you're awake. You can appreciate what that means to be awake. You can open to that, and you can trust that. And then there's practice to do and clarify that and strengthen it and have confidence in that. But because we're intrinsically awake, you can't gain this, nor can you lose it. You're already the Buddha. We're all Buddha. Buddha just means awake.
and I mean, so it applies to yourself, but also meeting, everyone you meet is
Yeah.
Buddha.
You know, the Buber called it I thou. So we're talking right here. I'm seeing your Buddha nature. You see mine. I thou. Isn't this what we want to see each other this way? And then we project. And you say something and I get pissed off and I put something in the middle of our relationship, and now I've polluted that. And now I no longer, if I'm judging you, I no longer seeing your Buddha nature. So if I'm practicing, I'm going to say, and I'm being courageous, I'm going to acknowledge that I projected onto you. I put some pollution here. It's my responsibility to clean that up, to eat that projection, so to speak, take it back. And I'm doing that because I want to see your true nature. I want to see you as Buddha. I want to see who you are. So we're intrinsically awake. Doesn't mean we realize that or we trust that, but yeah. It's like we all have a Cadillac, we just don't have the key, we don't know how to operate the car yet, but we already have all we need to be awake. It's not something you're going to gain from the practice. It's something you're going to hopefully learn to trust as already here.
And you said Buddha means awake.
Well, one meaning of Buddha is just simply means awake, yeah. Yeah. So we take refuge in Buddha, Dharma, Sangha. All Buddhists take refuge in Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. And there's three ways we can understand that. First of all, when we say we take refuge in Buddha, we're taking refuge in the person, Shakyamuni Buddha. He was a real person, lived in India, he had a long life. So we take refuge in him. The Dharma is all the teachings he left us. It was an oral tradition. They got written down in sutras later. And then the Sangha is the community of people that practice that. So one way of thinking about this is very literal and historical, the teaching of Buddha himself. But then another meaning of Buddha is awake, his enlightenment. So we take refuge in that experience he had under the Bodhi tree, where he had this huge opening where he said, I and all beings awaken simultaneously. He had this huge enlightenment experience, and we take refuge in that we also can have that.
So those who vilify, a certain other person, someone different, that seems like a very unawakened
Yes, that would
view.
seem to be quite unawakened. The other people is, I don't think that has much to do with awakening. And we other people, we're creating scapegoats.
Right.
You see it all the time in the culture. Immigrants, people of color, gay people, anyone that's different than us, we can other them. And that's the first step to, violence. Once you've othered someone, you've taken away their humanity, and you can talk about them as an animal or something, and that's what happens. People start using language, that's really, I'm not going to use that language here, I don't even want to hear it, but people start using language that makes it easier for them to commit violence against those people. So
And those people are awake as well?
everyone's intrinsically awake. Intrinsically. It doesn't mean that we realize it, but we have the intrinsic Buddha seed within our human experience.
The seed.
It's a good question, Claire. Yeah. So here's the puzzle about practice. You hear someone like me say this, and but that doesn't apply to me. I'm not awake. If he knew who I was, he wouldn't say I'm intrinsically awake. If he knew how you know, we all feel this. We all feel kind of like we're, what's the word? Frauds, you know, that we're all, I couldn't possibly be awake. Maybe someone else could. Maybe there's other Buddhas in the universe, but that doesn't apply to me.
So awake seems like something that you need to be, that you would be aware of. Okay, I'm awake.
Yes, yes, to wake up is to become aware that you are awake already, and to trust that as a source of your humanity, and then to live your life from that place has implications. To be awake means you're not going to other people. You're going to behave differently. You're going to behave in a way that's kind and compassionate, and you're going to try to help people and not create more suffering. And if you're in a situation where there is suffering, you're going to use all the tools that you have as a psychologist or a Zen teacher or whatever you have, to a counselor. Use all the tools you can to move the energy in that situation in a direction where there's less suffering. That's what bodhisattvas do. And so then practice becomes, well, now I need some tools in my toolbox. I need nonviolent communication. I need tools for conflict resolution. I need tools to do therapy with people. Then practice. You know the image of Avalokiteshvara with the 1,000 arms? That's Avalokiteshvara is on her altar. That's another version of her. But there's many versions of Avalokiteshvara with 1,000 arms, and in each hand she has a tool, a symbol. Like one hand she has a hammer, another one she has a scissor, one a knife. Each of those is a tool, a skillful means that she's using to hear the cries. First of all, she hears the cries of the world of suffering. She's opened her heart. And then she developed, because of that vow she's taken, because she's open to the suffering in the world, then she develops skillful means to help that. It's not good enough just to have an intention to heal suffering. You have to have wisdom. You have to have real skills. So then the practice is, well, what are the tools I need in my toolbox to go out and be in the world and be of service? I'm a doctor, I need certain skills. A therapist, I need skills. A counselor, whatever your job is, that's the way that you're being in the world. And you even if you're in a bad job that you think is not good, you find a way to add value in whatever situation you're in.
I think I can somehow, I think it's the word awake that I need to think about more, that I can see even those who live a violent lifestyle, that there is a Buddha in them that's
There's a
been
what?
that the Buddha is within, that's been
Yeah,
kind of corrupted by a lot of
yeah,
what's happened to the person.
yeah.
But I have a hard time saying those people are awake. But I think it's just a language.
Yeah. Yeah, well, people get stuck feeling like they're a victim, and then they have no agency. And the thing we all need psychologically is agency. And as soon as we lose that, then we're disempowered. So there's also the psychological aspect of the spiritual path, which I think is really important, that we all get disempowered through our conditioning in the world we're in, and we react, and then we feel like a victim, or we're either a victim or perpetrator or a savior, and that triad is always disempowering. You're trying to save somebody, that's also disempowering. Try to save an alcoholic. and see how that works. So that's the kind of the irony and the paradox of the Bodhisattva vow. We say, I take a vow to save all sentient beings, but there's nobody that needs saving that way. So we rephrase the vow a little differently. We say, how do we say it? Beings, how do we? Yeah. Yeah. I vowed to free them. So I find that a little better translation than save them, because save them, to me, it feels like that. When you try to save a victim, it's not going to work. You're already in that. Yeah.
I thou, that's not an I thou relationship.
Yeah, it's not an I-thou relationship, exactly. You're codependent now. And so there's so many ways we get stuck, aren't there? There's so many ways we lose track of who we are. Our true nature is awake, but it's hard to trust that. It's hard to see it. And so that's why we practice, so that we don't practice to become awake. We practice because we're already awake, and we want to clarify that, to realize it, to really trust it and see it, and then actualize it. Anyone else online? Hi, Jackie.
Hi, good morning. Hi, good morning. Sorry.
Probably Umbo's got to turn off his microphone or something. You guys are in the same room.
We're in the same motorhome, which is the same as one room. He's trying. Is that better?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, good morning, Roshi and Sangha. Just in terms of what we're talking about, I'm thinking that this idea, like, somebody could be walking around with cancer, but they don't know it.
Yeah.
Until like a doctor tells them that they have it, but that doesn't mean they don't have it before they find out.
That's right.
And I think of that kind of like in this awake or some of this language or the Buddha nature, like I can't take away the fact that I have it just because I don't know about it. And then the practice.
An interesting analogy to compare having cancer to being the Buddha.
No. That's not what I was doing. I was comparing the not knowing.
Uh-huh. Yeah, I understand what you're saying. Yeah.
Yeah. But I guess everything.
Someone could have cancer and they wouldn't even be aware that they had it, but then they go to the doctor and they get a test and the doctor says you have cancer.
Right, but that doesn't mean they didn't have it prior to finding out they did.
Yeah.
So in that way, that's the faith of having Buddha nature and being awake, is that the practice, I continue to find out about it, living this way. But
well, maybe awakeness is a virus that we all catch and then we can't get rid of it.
Yes. Thanks, Roshi.
Huh?
Our society seems to think that wokeness is a pathology.
Those are just words. They're just words. We're so binary, there's no middle ground.
So you mentioned willpower earlier in your talk.
Yeah.
And willpower, and I wasn't totally clear about you're bringing that up.
Well, it's subtle, because if we're talking about agency, I think agency is extremely important psychologically. When we get depressed and we contract, and we all have done this, and you kind of disappear, you hide, you contract, we lose agency. And one of the most difficult things to do is when we're really we go down that rabbit hole and we're chronically depressed, it's very hard to work with that because we can't find any agency in it. So there's no way to bring ourselves out of it, and that's part of the problem already. So that's a psychological issue. When I was talking about willpower, I was speaking of it more in terms of your intention and desire to practice and to realize the way, and you have to have that intention. You have to have that willpower to get going, but at some point you notice you're kind of getting in your own way. And so it serves you up to a point, and then you notice that you really have to let go of that in order to discover there's something else here. You're trying too hard to be in control. You feel like you have to do the meditation, and at some point you discover the meditation is doing you. So there's a kind of letting go and trusting that the wisdom is intrinsically here. The wisdom is here. The world we are living in is a sacred world, and yet it may be difficult to appreciate that. You know, in the time we're living in, everything is confusing and upside down, but if we really pay attention, we can appreciate that everything here is sacred, and we're part of that.
So I see that willpower as perseverance and patience.
I think that's a little different.
It's a little different.
I think so. Willpower is my wanting to, feeling like I have to be in control of it. That I'm the one that is, it's kind of subtle. So I'm doing the practice to count my breath, and then I notice that I start, let me put it this way. It's often the way I talk about emptiness and wisdom, is you start out and you have to have some awareness, and you develop awareness, and then you notice something is happening where there's a kind of warmth arising in your relationship to others, and it feels good, right? A kind of empathy, a capacity to connect with each other, see people more clearly. That feels good. But then and we discover this just through trial and error, when you try to own that, it goes away. As soon as you try to have it, now I'm gonna manufacture that warmth. It doesn't happen like that, because it's a kind of grace that happens, right, from letting go. And I discovered it kind of by accident, because I'm practicing, and now there's this warmth, and it feels good. And so I learned by trial and error that if I try to control that warmth in any way, it just doesn't work. And so then I learned it's a kind of letting go. If I let go, the warmth is here. It's already here, and I'm not in charge of it. And then it feels good. And that's a kind of teaching about emptiness. We kind of discover it at a very organic and intuitive level, not just intellectually. And then that leads to the discovery of prajna wisdom. You then realize there is this kind of intelligence which is non-referential, which doesn't confirm my ego in any way whatsoever. It doesn't have anything to do with my agenda or it just doesn't have anything to do with me, the ego that I have. And that actually, I then learned to value that as something that allows me to have that wisdom and that grace and that warmth to be here. But I don't own it. And as soon as I try to possess it, I get in the way. So I have to get out of the way to really see the truth of my Buddha nature and the truth of others. But as long as I'm working too hard to manufacture it in some way, or then I get in the way. That's kind of what I mean.
It's kind of like about letting go and seeing it, and that drive of confirming me and letting go and just breathing.
Now, it's a really interesting way to think about this, and I think neuroscience is useful. But the mode network, I always forget the name of it. It's, huh? What? Default mode network, yeah. They discovered this, you know about that, Charisse? Uh-huh. There's this part of the brain that is most active when we're doing nothing. It takes up about 20% of the oxygen of our brain. And scientists discovered this, and they were just amazed that this is, you'd think it would be active when we're doing something. That part of our brain has pretty much to do with, that's our self-talk. Me, mine, me, I, myself, me, I'll do it my way. That's me, that's that part of the brain is all about me and myself. That's kind of our self-talk that we all know, right? Now, there's nothing the matter with that. That's part of being a human being. That's how our brains are built, and probably some of that is useful to keep me safe and stuff. But what happens when you practice mindfulness is you're starting to use other parts of your brain. You're building out other networks in your brain that help you be empathic or help you modulate fear. Other parts of your brain that are going to help you be more integrated as a human being. And if you don't do that, then if you give that voice in your head too much authority, then you start to become a kind of solo self. That's all you have. You don't have access to other resources that would enrich your life as a human being. You become more isolated, less connected to other people, and you become lonely. And I always say that I think we may be the loneliest country in the world. The statistics are frightening about how many people are lonely. And become a solo self.
Is that rumination?
Yes.
Ruminations.
About me. Rumination is always pretty much about me. I'm worried about me. I'm not good enough. I don't measure up. All kinds of stuff. And meditation is helping you diversify that and reach. And there's so many ways we could say this. So you just, take that voice in your head and externalize it and put it over here. Call it your life coach and listen to what that life coach has to tell you. And you listen to that for a while, it's going to give you contradictory advice. And you listen to that a while and say, man, you're a terrible life coach. You're fired. You're fired, man. I'm not going to listen to you anymore. But we don't think that. We give that voice too much authority. And so I think that's also the kind of letting go. You're letting go of the voice in your head. That's not who we are. We're the one who hears the voice in our head. That's very different. That's a meta-awareness.
So that's a strong habit also.
It's a habit.
It's a very strong habit that you're trying to
Strong habit.
change.
And it's a good reason to have a regular practice of meditation, because what you're doing in meditation is you're really working against that habit. What you're doing when you practice one-pointed attention, essentially, is that voice in your head is taking you away from paying attention to your breath. But you have an intention, you have this powerful upaya now, skillful means to come back. And every time you come back, you're not strengthening the voice in your head or that part of your brain. You're actually starting to access and build up other parts of your brain that are helpful. So I always say this in the meditation, when you're sitting, you're not doing nothing. You're actually doing something important. In terms of neuroscience, in terms of your brain. Yeah. Maybe that's enough for today, huh? So, boy, that was we need to change the schedule tomorrow. That was an hour and a half.
Change the schedule back to 10 o'clock sitting?
Maybe we should change the schedule for tomorrow.
Okay, 10 o'clock
Then I
we
won't
start
talk so
sitting.
long.
No, so what time do we start sitting tomorrow?
We'll just follow the schedule here, and
All right,
I think I already
10:30.
changed it on the online
Okay, it's
schedule.
changed
I'm sorry,
online.
I got confused.
10:30 we begin sitting tomorrow,
Yeah, it'll be-
mid-morning.
Yeah, I changed it for you online, I changed it already.
More Samu time?
No, what it means is that you have a half hour to rest, to
Yes.
clean up.
Yes.
When you're done with Samu, put things away and then take a little rest, get some water or tea.
So we have, we do Samu till 10,
Yeah.
basically, yeah.
And then you
Okay.
rest, and then we start sitting at 10:30.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
Prepare for lunch.
Prepare for lunch.